Okay.
Yeah,
I'm,
pretty
I'm
nice.
going to bring on this jealous man here. Dance with me, Jenny. Hey, Jenny.
Hi, Frank. Hi, everybody. Great to be back.
Hello.
Oh, this is brilliant. This is absolutely wonderful. And but you know what? As I said, Joe, at the beginning of the show, it's going to be a great history show as well. And at 9 o'clock, I'll be showing clips. And I think you'd be delighted with being an expat and look at what's going to be shown on the clips.
Cool.
What I've done. Is that okay with you?
I'm happy
You'll get
with that.
homesick. You'll
Let's
get
do it.
homesick. Yeah, let's do it. All right then. So let's start. Hey Joe, did you ever? This is what Derek will be talking about. Did you ever know a singer by the name of Dion DiMucci? Dion.
Sounds very familiar.
Well, I'm the
I
type of guy who
Debucci.
never.
It's like a classical Debucci.
Yeah, well, he sang the Wonder
The one Runaround Sue and his two big
and
ones.
Runaround Sue.
I like the song, like
Unbelievable.
Wanderer. That song.
Yeah,
And Wanderer, go
absolutely
around.
brilliant.
Is that the song?
Yeah,
Nice.
because I've got flow on me, right? You know, he's just one of those singers, and he's so fast in singing.
Yeah.
And you know how he's got these words out in such a boom, 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 and yet you understand them. Well, anyway, I'm going to ask the wonderful Derek. How did now? Don't forget, he's an Italian American.
Yeah.
An Italian American, just like Sinatra and Dino Crocchetti, that's Dean Martin, all the rest of them. So, how did he kick off? How did he start, Derek?
Well, it's the guy is known very much for the Runaround Sue in the early 60s, but he's had a very, very full and varied career. I mean, he released his latest album in 2024. He had his birthday a few days ago. He'd been 85. He was born in 39. And happy birthday, Dion, the 18th of July. But one fascinating thing I found when I was checking the various records and stuff, discography, there seem to be two spellings of his name that come up on the records. One is the usual D-I uppercase M-U-double-C-I, and that's the one most of the biographies you'll ever find use. But on a lot of the records, it's actually credited, when it's credited to DiMucci, to D-I, then space M-U single C-I. And I never found any kind of explanation as to what it was. And it can't just be a typo, because these are actually, the record labels themselves. So I thought that was, I never really come across that before. I mean, Keith Richard changed his name to Richards, or from Richards to Richard at the beginning of the 60s. And then in the 70s, he decided to go back to his original spelling. But I thought that was really quite interesting. And the guy started out very much as a Hank Williams fan. I read that by the age of 12, he collected 50 Hank Williams singles. So I think that's pretty good going for a 12-year-old.
So his old genre of music changed, from Hank Williams to what he actually did.
Yeah, but he started out very much in the doo-wop era, the mid-50s, early mid-50s. And he formed his doo-wop band, is where his first half a dozen records came from, and they very much were doo-wop arrangements. And that was the Belmonts. So that was Dion and the Belmonts.
Dion and the Belmonts, yeah.
Yeah, I mean they were reasonably quite successful. But what's interesting is we talk about crossover hits, usually R&B artists who hit the Billboard R&B charts and then later on managed to get it also in the Billboard pop chart. He did it the other way around. He cracked the pop charts first, and his next single actually was a sort of reverse crossover and became an R&B hit because he was very much on that cusp of R&B. I mean, they were quite a rare commodity, Dion and the Belmonts. They were a white doo-wop group because most of them were black doo-wop groups, usually 3, 4, 5 members. And he was on the ill-fated Buddy Holly tour. The Winter Dance.
When he was killed, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Was he supposed to go on that plane, by the way?
There was never any talk really of him getting on. I mean, his band originally, Buddy Holly's band, he'd split up with the Crickets by then. And his guitarist and bass player effectively should have been on the plane, but they swapped seats with a big bopper, J.P. Richardson, and Ricky Valance. So, they were unfortunately on the plane. But, I mean, he was on the tour from the beginning to the end. I mean, to put it into context, why Buddy Holly decided, why would you hire a plane when you've got a perfectly good tour bus? Well, they didn't have a perfectly good tour bus, but the heating wasn't working that very much. We're talking the Great Plains across the Bible Belt of America. I've been there. It is very, very cold. And to put it into context, the drummer missed that particular gig and was nowhere near the flight because he was in hospital with frostbite.
Go away.
Yes.
Wow.
He did rejoin the tour shortly after that. I mean, it wasn't cut your foot off kind of frostbite, but it was actually, frostbite that kept him away from that particular gig at Moorhead.
But what was the general feeling, shall we say, or mood when people realise it's not like the technology today where you found in an instant. But what was it like when the news was filtering through? What was the mood? Say, like in this country, obviously America, what was the mood like, when they found out what had happened with these great stars?
Yeah, there didn't seem to be any thought whatsoever to cancel the tour. What happened, he was flying to, they were in Clear Lake, Iowa, and they were flying to Fargo, North Dakota for a gig in Moorhead, which is sort of relatively around the corner from Fargo. And what happened was that when news of the tragic death of Buddy Holly, the plane crash and the death, the first reaction was for the call to go out around Fargo to find someone to fill his place so that the concert could go ahead that night. And Bobby V, I think he was only about 16. He certainly was in that kind of mid-teens age. And his backing group, the Shadows, believe it or not, I mean, they took Buddy Holly's place at the Moorhead gig that particular night. And that's what kick-started Bobby V's career. So, it's an ill wind, as they say. And what happened then, it's also interesting from the point of view that he was replaced on the tour then by Fabian and Paul Anka. And they were effectively the new clean-cut, pretty boy, teen idol sort of face of rock and roll. By then, of course, I mean, Little Richard was out the scene, Elvis was in the army, Jerry Lee Lewis's career had nosedived. So it was going through quite a transition in this sort of 58, 59 kind of era. And Dion was right on the edge of it. And then, he had in the early 60s, he had those really big hits. I mean, if you could say his golden age was really sort of 59, Teenager in Love, and that was his first UK hit. He'd had a bunch of hits in America.
Can I come in there, Derek?
Yeah.
Can I come in there? Because what you said about Teenager in Love, I always thought that was a Marty Wilde song.
Yeah, he covered it.
Is that was just a cover version? And
most of Marty Wilde, most of the British rock and roll were covers of American, because Endless Sleep was a cover of the Jodie Foster. I mean, she had a hit with it in America. So they were, and Marty Wilde particularly, I think they were good cover versions.
Yeah.
Most of his, I think he covered Rubber Ball as well, offhand.
Marty Wilde must have been about 40 odd singing, "Why must I be a teenager?"
Absolutely, absolutely, and the Wildcats. It's
You know what I
interesting.
mean?
The Wildcats were on Eddie Cochran's
I like taking
final tour when he died. I mean, it was Marty Wilde's Wildcats that were backing Eddie Cochran when he made his final tour. So you know, it's a small world, as they say.
Always the luck of the draw, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
in those days, the show must go on.
Yeah.
So it was like people are paying the tickets to see someone, so let's put someone else up there.
Look at Josephine, look at Josephine looking around, and look at their background.
Oh no,
Looks
beautiful.
warmer than here.
Hey,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
LA. She's in LA. Look at that, unbelievable. I love Joe.
I remember
I was watching my dog. Yeah. I work. This is my job, man. If I don't take this boat out, I don't earn any money. It's that simple.
Oh God, you don't need money. You've got loads of money.
This is my income. It's my business. It's everything I own is in this boat.
Really?
Well,
Wow.
you know, no fear, right? That's what makes me scouse.
Can you think? Do you actually hire the captain? Do you actually hire the captain, Joe?
Yeah,
You know,
I have
like
to. Yeah, it's called it's called bareboat renting, and that means as an owner, I can't actually be on the boat, so I have to hire a captain and a team to take it out for me, and that covers the insurance and all that liability. Yeah, so
well,
I'm really busy.
Do you know when you go out, Joe? When
Yeah.
you go out on your boat and that, like, I mean, the people who go, are they fishermen? You know, fishing ladies as well. You know, do they go fishing?
Well, there's an option to fish. I have a boat kitted up for deep sea fishing, but I think I'm really lucky because I haven't had that happen yet. And equally, I don't think I'd like the smell of fish on my boat for days on end. You know, they're a bit smelly.
See, I always think, you know, people like yourself, your good self, who own boats, they always seem to go out to fish for marlin.
Oh yeah.
And
I
don't
guess.
mean Marlon Brando either, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, you
So,
know, it's a job. It's a job.
Oh, come on, it's a job. What's the matter with you?
It is a job. You know, I don't get to hand this off to HR and sleep well at night and go work in the morning. This is 24 hours. It's more than that. It's my my well-being. It's my purpose for being here is, you know, just to be self-employed again. It's just very lucky I was able to work hard.
You've always worked hard. You're one of the greatest ladies who I know.
Oh,
Greatly inspired me. Honestly,
yeah.
I'm not just saying that, by the way. I'm not just saying that because
really sweet
you went through we'll talk about that in the second half, eh?
Very humble.
Hey, we'll talk about that in the second half because
Absolutely.
I want to get over to Anthony. Anthony, you know, we were talking there about the other fella, Dion, not Dion, Buddy Holly, the big bopper.
Yeah.
You know, do you know when that, you know, you're a music man yourself, you actually play.
Big time, yeah. And Buddy Holly was just slightly before my generation, because I kind of grew up, and the Beatles and the Stones had hit the stuff, the radio. But I was lucky enough to, one of my dad's friends was a lovely guy, is a lovely guy, called Dave Williams, who played in the Merseybeat bands and stuff. And Buddy Holly was still an icon to them. And he used to tell me stories and show me a couple of my first guitar chords were all Buddy Holly songs. And as a young kid, it was fairly, not, I wouldn't say easy to play, but accessible, because there was a power in the music, even though it was limited to 3 or 4 chords. And then as I grew up, I kind of read more about him, which is the way, life goes. We find an interest in something, we seek it out. So he's always kind of been there for me musically, and also I just think what he did was amazing. And what they all did at that time, which was fairly basic, and given that you said before about technology, nowadays you can make an album sitting in your garden shed, and some people do. And with others, it sounds like they've made an album in a garden shed. But it's totally different world now. But then they were just leaders.
Well, even the Beatles, the rooftop tour, for example, they had all the basic things. Just imagine what they'd sound like today in a live concert.
Well,
what would they be like, Derek? Singing like the Beatles with today's technology.
Yeah, I mean, one of the really big differences is when we're talking about the Buddy Holly era, the late 50s and early 60s, the Beatles era. Essentially, the records are recorded live. The musicians all play together. There'd be covers around the drums to stop leakage. But essentially, they played as though they were playing to an audience, and they do a number of takes usually, and then the engineers would just splice together the best bits of the takes. Long before overdubs and the like. Because I think part of the reason the Beatles stopped touring when they did was just that. I mean, there was a time of Revolver, and they were into backwards tracks and all kinds of stuff, and there's no way they could reproduce on stage at that time what they were doing in the recording studio. I actually remember Cliff Richard being interviewed contemporaneously around that sort of mid-60s time, and he was saying that he has to be a bit careful sometimes in the recordings so that he can reproduce it on stage, because to get echo, people like Joe Meek would record the singer in the bathroom to get a bit more echo, or in the corridor, unlike now when you can actually make sure people are pitch perfect. And I think that's one of the real big differences. Artists had to really recreate their own sound in the studio, and often they were done. I mean, the Beatles' first album, I think, was recorded in about 3 days. I mean, most albums, and certainly singles, there'd be a few takes, a few days, a week or two at the absolute most. So the times have really moved on since then. I mean, it puts it in context when you think that Sgt. Pepper was recorded on 2 4-track tape machines. Absolutely incredible. So they record onto the other to record back onto the other to get some of the more sophisticated stuff.
Nowadays, you can have that technology built into a phone.
Oh, absolutely.
Or an iPad.
Yeah. I mean, there's more technology in a phone than put the men on the moon.
Yeah.
Well, I made the records, as you know, and I went to a good friend of mine and a good friend of Anthony, and that was Billy Kinsley out of the Mersey Beats.
Nice.
And I went to his recording studio, and he was the backer. He was the backing group. I made the records. How many, my friends can say, he made a record. I mean, my people who I grew up with, and bloody hell, I want a brick in the cabin wall, it's got the Beatles and everybody else, the Rolling Stones. I want a brick of me, never happened like that.
Quite right.
So listen, is I know Dion, it's his birthday today, as you said, and he's 85 years of age. Is he still performing, by the way?
Yeah, absolutely. He released an album called Girlfriends this year in the March of this year. It was a series of duets with people. One of them was Colleen Carter, the daughter of June Carter, Johnny Cash fame.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, in 2020, he recorded that. This gives you an idea of the guy's standing in the sort of music world. In 2020, he recorded an album called Blues with Friends. And again, that was the same sort of thing. It was a bunch of tracks with, other people, duets and the like. And some of the people who feature on that with him are Jeff Beck, Billy Gibbons, ZZ Top, Van Morrison, Paul Simon. He's recorded a few times with Paul Simon, Bruce Springsteen, and Stevie Van Zandt, the guitarist from Bruce Springsteen's band. So you can see the guy's held in some serious esteem. I mean, what's interesting, he had his heyday, well, not his heyday, the really big hits in the early 60s. 61 was Runaround Sue and The Wanderer. And then his last American hit of that period was a track called Drip Drop in the end of 63. And what happened, like most of his contemporaries at the time, that was when the Beatles arrived. So that charted in the November of 63. So it would still have been in the charts when on the Ed Sullivan Show in the February of 64. And then, of course, the whole British invasion thing started then. And people like Dion, they just couldn't get hit records. They couldn't get blues. They couldn't get airplay. But what he did, I mean, he's had a fascinating career. I mean, he sort of reinvented himself, what's referred to as his blues era in sort of 64, 65. And he was recording things like I'm Your Hoochie Coochie Man, Muddy Waters song written by Willie Dixon, Shout, the Isley Brothers song, and Johnny B. Good, Chuck Berry. He really reinvented himself. Then 65, he put another backing group together. He called the Wanderers. He didn't have an awful lot of commercial success. And what happened, he had most of his hit records in the early days with a label called Lorry. And when they dried up, he moved to Columbia. And he recorded, I don't know about dozens, but a lot of singles with Columbia, none of which troubled the charts too much. And then in late 68, he reinvented himself again as a singer-songwriter. He re-signed to Lorry. And apparently a part of that deal was that he recorded a song called Abraham, Martin and John, which is, also recorded by Smokey Robinson, Marvin Gaye. And believe it or not, Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock, recorded a version of that in 1969 as well. And he then, over the course of the next, into the early 70s, next 4 or 5 years, he recorded a bunch of singer-songwriter albums. And I think this is how he not so much endeared himself. He's such a respected guy. You tend to think of him just in that Wanderer, Runaround Sue era. But, he really was up to all kinds of stuff. He recorded an album with Phil Spector in the mid-70s in 75. And
how good was Phil Spector as a... I'm just going to say this. I want to be your Uchi Q man. I can't sing that's a joke, can I? I'm going to be your Uchi Q man.
Uchi Coochie Man. Long John Baldry sang that too, huh?
Yeah, Long John. I thought Long John Baldry sang one of the most heart-rendering songs, and you could see the passion oozing out of it, and I forget the bloody title.
Let the Heartaches.
Let the Heartaches. Oh,
he had a voice about 60 miles wide. It was just
amazing artist.
Again,
I actually saw him perform in Liverpool around about 92. Yeah.
Wow.
Go away.
Yeah. Yeah, he spoke about being in the cabin with the Beatles and, hanging out with the Rolling Stones, Elton John, Eric Clapton, Rod Stewart.
Wow.
Yeah, what amazing artists they were. In fact, I just saw the Rolling Stones in LA last week.
Yeah, you did, didn't you?
Oh, he can. I don't know what it is he's taken. He's put in his coffee, but he didn't stop for 90 minutes. It was incredible.
Wow. Wow.
And he's 80. How old's Derek? How old?
He's 80 something. Yeah, he's just
Yeah, it
had
must be
another
his early
child.
80s.
He's in his
Yeah.
80s.
I know.
It's like Derek said then about Dion. It's not, they weren't in it for one hit song and then that was it. It was their life, you know.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? They're going to sing a song, and if the public don't want to buy that particular record, then they'll perform anyway. And the respect that they earn over the years, as you said, Derek, for the people who to want to play on his album,
Yeah.
You know, that's wonderful in itself, and we often get confused with success being the amount of money you've got in the bank.
That's right.
And success being to do what you want to do and other people to enjoy it. No.
Yeah.
I was going to ask,
happy.
I'm sorry, what was you going to say?
I was saying success is almost like happiness. If you're content with all that you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that coincides with what the both of you are saying. What I'm going to ask Derek. Do you know, you mentioned about, like when the Beatles came about and they went over to America, then all of a sudden you see even the likes of Elvis, they flanked.
Yeah.
And so how did those record companies over there and those producers, how did they feel? Were they jealous? Or I know Elvis was. I don't care what anyone says. Elvis was jealous of the Beatles because he seemed to have thought these fellas here have taken everything away from me, and not just him, but also the other fine singers who came out or he was out at the time. They just took over completely. Then you mentioned about the British invasion, because it seemed to swallow the British invasion swallows up America. Am I right?
Absolutely. It only lasted a couple of years, really, effectively. But I mean, people like Fats Domino, who'd had 40-odd hits before that, his run of hits ended then. So many of that era ended, never. Well, what's ironic about it, though, it was the very success of the British bands. I mean, it's real coals to Newcastle country. You know, what the British bands did, like the Animals, the Beatles, the Stones, they took R&B back into America. And the British invasion was very much, and the Liverpool groups were in very much the first wave of that 1964 British invasion. The Searchers were early players. Dave Clark 5 was actually, given they're a London band, they were the most successful after the Beatles, and they were the first people to actually arrive as a touring band. The Beatles did a couple of gigs around that Ed Sullivan trip, but they didn't go back for another 3 or 4 months to do their first tour. But what happened was that for the next couple of years, it was very much a British scene. And then the whole rock thing started in sort of 65, 66, and it came all back together again, basically.
Do you think Elvis, going back to Elvis, do you think he regretted, I know it was Colonel Parker, but do you think he regretted not coming over to England to perform?
I think he would like to have toured. I mean, Elvis did love being on stage. I mean, the guy I never saw him, sadly, but, right up until the end of his career, famously he was making a TV special, literally a couple of months before he died. So his very last, 2 or 3 of his very last concerts were filmed. And he was a little bit on the chubby side by then, but his stage performance, his stage persona was still absolutely magnetic. He was playing to sold out concerts. He played to sold out concerts right through his entire career. He still had the ladies screaming for scarves and loving it when he threw a scarf or wrapped a scarf around one. And his voice was still absolutely amazing. But I think what's interesting about Elvis in the 60s and why Elvis survived uniquely, well, not quite uniquely, I suppose, but one of the very few to actually survive and prosper across the early 60s against the British invasion, was a very smart decision on the Colonel's part to not have him do live performances. Just if you wanted to see Elvis, you had to go to the movies. If you wanted to listen to Elvis, you had to buy songs essentially from the movies. And what it did, when everybody else's career was nosediving, Elvis was actually literally in a parallel rock and roll universe. You know, he was making his films while the Beatles and the Stones were out about touring, breaking new records and all the rest of it. But he wasn't in competition with any of it. He wasn't in competition with the Beatles. He still had a loyal following. Again, the Colonel steered the 2 years he was in the army very shrewdly, and the record label, they released just enough to keep the interest going. And then Elvis, after, you know, by the time we get to 64, I mean, he wasn't making personal appearances. I think that's why he survived, because he had a fan base. People were going to see him. He wasn't in competition musically with what was going on. And what's even smarter, if you imagine if he hadn't done that, when you come to 65, 66, when rock music was born, with the likes of Jimi Hendrix and the Cream in this country, and the Doors and the whole West Coast thing, and the West Coast thing with the Doors and the like, and the East Coast thing with the Velvet Underground, that really all started to commercially succeed in 1966, really. And then you had a whole new raft of players hitting the field. And Pink Floyd came along with Psychedelia, and again, he would have been competing with all that, with massive, you know, because it all became about singer-songwriting. The bands that survived the first half of the 60s, British bands, into the second half of the 60s, were all the singer-songwriting bands. The Who, the Beatles, the Stones, the Kinks, you know, they were the ones that survived. So Elvis, throughout the 1960s, he just plowed his own furrow. His movies all made money. He continued having 3-4 hit singles a year. And it came to a sort of natural end, I think, in 69 with Change of Habit was his last movie that wasn't a tour type movie. And that sort of came to a natural end because he started gigging again. You know, the whole Vegas thing kicked off the tail end of his movie.
Well, I reckon, though, to be honest, when you said about the LA, I'm sure, Joe, do you know any people, you know, you're in America, you're in where everyone wants to be honest. Did you know anyone who actually seen Elvis live? And if you did, what did they say about him?
No, sorry, I didn't meet anyone who met Elvis. I don't think. No.
Yeah,
just my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law married her husband, and she told me the truth. She said, I only married him because he looked like Elvis.
That happens so much in Liverpool, never mind anywhere else in the world. There's so many fellas with the boot polish and the. But
yeah,
I had when we were the capital of culture, you know, I was told to bring these Finnish parliamentarians around, because the following year, Finland, a place called Turku, was nominated as, you know, the capital of culture. So they said, will you bring them around? I said, no. And they said, oh, go on, please bring them around. You're the only one who can do this. So I said, oh, okay then. And I got fed up bringing them around because I met them at 9:30 or something in the morning. And then I was around 4:30 in the afternoon, and it was quite warm that day as well. And I'm walking around with a suit and a tie on and, you know, showing them things and doing this and doing that and everything else. But all they were saying to me was, can we go to the cavern, please? When are we going to the cavern? And I had that from 10 o'clock in the morning. So anyway, I came down out of St. George's Hall, where the Stebble Fountain is, you know, that door. So anyway, I came out of there and I was waiting for them. So they all piled down, and one of them went, what is that statue? That up there? And it was Wellington. And Wellington's overlooking, you know, his most famous battle, which overlooks the Empire Theatre. And I said, I was that fed up, and I went to Elvis. I said, we built a statue of Elvis. I said, because he never ever came here, and we loved him. We loved him in Liverpool. And they were all, oh, Elvis. I forgot to tell them that I was only joking. And I'm sure there's a 30-foot statue somewhere in Turkey of Elvis in Finland.
But you know what? You've just underlined there what kind of Derek was saying. We talked about Dion and we talked all those people. And even though they're physically not in the top of the charts, Elvis, Buddy Holly, not on a stage, they have inspired so many people. I think one of John Lennon's quotes was, before Elvis, there was no one. And that's his take on music, because both he and McCartney were passionate about it. And he also said, without Elvis, there would be no Beatles. I think if you multiply that, Long John Baldry is wonderful in his own right, but I'm pretty sure that Elvis and Dion and all these people, Buddy Holly, that inspired us Brits to pick up a guitar, not really what we had going for us over here. You know, Marty Wilde, there would be no Marty Wilde without Elvis. There'd be no Cliff Richard without Elvis, and then from that it builds up. You know, and that's the way it is with architecture. And we talked about that. You know, someone will travel, see something, you know, same. It's always happened.
Well, I've always said that about architects. Yeah. They go away and they take great inspiration from other people's work. And Absolutely. That's why we've got so many fantastic buildings in Liverpool. That's why we've got the likes of all the neoclassical stuff, the likes of St. George's Hall, the likes of the Sessions House, the likes of the Walker, the likes of the library, the likes of everything. Yeah. It's incredible because no matter what, you know, you do take inspiration. We all have role models. Every one of us has a role model.
In all of our occupations. And it's a wonderful thing that Derek was saying before about the in America, the British boom. And we kind of went back there and we were playing our version of American music to Americans, which sounded different. So they were inspired by that. So there's that reciprocal circle that goes on forever.
It completely revitalized the careers of the 50s guys as well, because people like Chuck Berry and Muddy Waters were opening for people like the Beatles and the Stones when the British bands came over. You know, those 50s artists, Bo Diddley, you know, nobody really knew much about people like that. But it was thanks to the British invasion bands, particularly the R&B based bands, which a lot of them were. They really brought this black R&B music back into the forefront of the teenage minds, and I think it was also it's understated how important rock and roll was to the whole integration, because very, very heavily segregated America in the 50s and early 60s. And it was the rock and roll that brought the kids together, dancing in the aisles, and that's not often really looked at. But I think that was an important factor in what was going on, and certainly British rock and roll, if you like, started very much grew out of skiffle, out of trad jazz. I mean, trad jazz was the 50s beatnik music of choice. And the skiffle groups were breakout groups of 3 or 4 guys who change instruments and play skiffle songs in the interval when the band went to the bar or outside. Or it wouldn't have been outside for the smoke then. It would have been to the bar for the smoke, of course. And I remember famously the Beatles, when the Cavern started in 57, it started very, very much as a jazz club. Alan Sittler, I think the guy that opened it, he was very down the jazz. He tolerated skiffle because of its association with jazz. And when the Quarrymen played their first gig at the Cavern, the story goes that John Lennon and the band broke into a couple of Elvis songs, and John Sittler sent a message to them on stage saying, "Cut out the bloody rock." Say,
can you answer the question here? Can you answer the question? I'll tell you one of the most blues records that the Stones made, and it's pure blues, and that's the Little Red Rooster.
Absolutely.
Pure blues stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a Willie Dixon song originally, covered by just about everybody. I can't remember who actually popularised it, quite possibly Muddy Waters. But absolutely. I mean, the Stones were really down that's mostly because of Brian Jones in the very early days, I think. But they really did help to establish British bands and bands like the Animals as well. I mean, they were very much down the blues roots as well. And
even before then, you had the likes of you're going back to the early days of skiffle and stuff. We had our heroes, I guess, musically. Then people like Lonnie Donegan,
absolutely,
would be covering songs from Leadbelly.
Yeah, that's right.
Most of us in England have never heard of.
Yeah,
and it was that thing of people like Big Bill Bruins who came over here and would play. I know for me, when I was a kid and hearing Buddy Holly and hearing Robert Johnson and the like Leadbelly, that was the sound of America. And I just fell in love with America through the music. Before, now we're bombarded by images and we all have phones and everything, so we can be in touch with the world. But at that time, as a young wannabe guitar player, I just thought America was the place to be born and brought up because of all this wealth of music.
And yet people say about Liverpool, it was the place to be born. Strange, isn't it?
Well, we know that now, don't we? You know that.
No, we know that now, yeah. Can I just go on about these? These are very good comments here, by the way, and a couple of questions to answer. So, first off is Gary Rigby. Dion and Elvis. Let me finish the comments, please. Then you can answer. Dion and Elvis Presley both made psychedelic albums in the late 60s, dismissed as cash-ins at the time. The Dion album is actually very good. And Neil Broderick, Evening Boys, my question is, would you consider Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon in the jazz category? And Liverpool FC Vlogs, hello Frank and guest, hope you're all well. And that's the Liverpool Yanks Cunard, boys never really got the credit for those contributions. I think what he's saying there is they brought the music, they brought the songs over from America.
Absolutely.
Especially right in the 50s.
Well, that was the great thing about Liverpool musicians. in the early 60s, that they all had access to that catalogue of singles, albums that came over, and they weren't afraid to say, you know, my Uncle Joe worked on the boats, and this is what came back. You know, all of Ray Charles music, and gosh.
Well, listen, boys. I'm going to ask you to try and answer those questions, if I might. The likes of My Question by Neil Broderick, and I want you to answer them also on the Cunard Yanks, and also whatever happened to the Cavern. So the first one is about. I want you to answer them before we finish for the break. My question, says Neil. My question is what is, would you consider Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon in jazz category, Derek?
Well, I think that certainly if you look at the track, a Great Gig in the Sky, with Claire Torrey's voice as instrument, which she was only paid a session fee for until very recently. But that you know, you could argue that very much is swinging towards you know, jazz, a jazz concept. You know, it is sort of scat in the extreme almost. I mean, unbelievable track. I think there's a very, very fine dividing line as well between music genres once you get away from the, you know, the regular 3/4/4/4 beats. I mean, thinking about jazz, of course, you've got all these weird time signatures going down all the time, and they just keep changing time signatures. They're going along, basically, the drop of a hat, as it were. And Pink Floyd, you know, they also quite famously, you know, didn't particularly stick to, you know, 4/4. They would drift out into some of the more obscure time signatures. So again, you know, there's very much a jazz influence there. And the whole thing about jazz is it's improvisational to a great extent. So again, you know, it lends itself to the kind of music that was, you know, coming from Grateful Dead or Pink Floyd in the late 60s, early 70s. So I think the thing is, there's a lot of influences on the music of the. It goes back to what we were saying about earlier. You know, it all comes from Elvis, and that's mid 50s rock and roll. That subsequent generations of musicians just kept taking a stage further and a stage further and a stage further. I think that's one of the problems musicians have nowadays. There's not much left to explore. You know, Lou Reed made a double album of white noise, literally. You know, I mean, John Cale's done his 21 minutes of not too much sound going on. And, you know, just about every avenue, the whole electronic instrument synthesizers and the like appeared, and then they were used to create whole raft of new sounds. So I suppose
do you reckon that, you know, I've got to finish now, I'm going straight on, but answer this briefly. Do you think that the likes of us, you know, I'm talking about this psychedelia sort of genre, do you think that people took, like, they delved too deep into, I'm talking about listeners, by the way, you know, all this flower power and everything, do you reckon that they, you know, delved too deep into it? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Do you reckon that, you know, the way Lennon just sang, give peace a chance, you know, war is over, and, you know, all this happy Xmas, war is over, what he was singing, rather than, you know, these flower power people and all this psychedelia, they were thinking too deep.
I think
way.
Yeah, no, I personally, I was quite really into the whole prog thing. And I think there's room for both. I understand what you're saying about, you know, the simplicity, and often more is, or less is more. But I think, you know, when you start to look at bands, well, the jazz rock fusion of Colosseum, King Crimson, and that sort of stuff that really did, I think, you know, delve down pretty deeply into what was going on, and it wasn't everybody's cup of tea, as it were. But I think that in itself is an important aspect of how particularly the 70s grew up. And it's worth just mentioning, just back to Dion for a second, and not particularly was that across the 1980s he found religion, because he was born a Catholic, but he had an epiphany, and across the 1980s he only recorded, like Bob Dylan in the same period, he only recorded religious albums. So I mean, the guy's had one of the most varied careers I think I've ever come across, basically.
And it's funny the way Norman Greenbaum, who was a Jew, well, still was a Jew, you know, was a Jew who sang about spirit in the sky and he's going to Jesus.
Absolutely.
That was a bit mad, wasn't it? I just want to ask, I'll have to go to my lovely mate, Anthony. Be brief, Anthony, please. I've got to finish for the break. About the cavern. That's whatever happened to the original cavern at Liverpool FC Vlogs.
They pulled it down. By I think it was half the council and half the railway. They pulled it down with plans that we couldn't see, as happens with many things. Yeah, wow. Because when the 70s hit, the Beatles almost became not unpopular, but there was so much else going on. So they were old-fashioned. And unfortunately, what happens in most cities, what certainly happens in Liverpool, to our anger and horror, is over the years, if they regard something as not fit for purpose, to pull it down. Not making it fit for purpose.
Well, listen, I'm going to go to the break. Are you staying with us, Derek, or are you going to get off? Are you going to do a gig somewhere?
No, I'll stay with you if that's okay, mate.
No,
by the way, Derek, for all you, in case we lose each other, can I, if I ever go on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, can you be one of my friends I call for music questions? Your knowledge is amazing. Yeah, I'm calling you.
That's right. Anyway, I'm going to have this little break now, ladies and gents. Stay with me, and we'll see you after the break. I think you're going to enjoy this, by the way.